5th is a day that's going to stick with the men and women of this police department their entire careers.
A monster. I mean, monster comes to mind. Somebody with no soul.
In 2009, the tranquil town of Columbia, Illinois was shattered by a crime so heinous it would forever haunt the community. Sheri Coleman, a loving wife and devoted mother, along with her 2 sons, Garett and Gavin, were found brutally murdered in their home on the morning of May 5th. This horrific act not only destroyed a family, but left a trail of unanswered questions, shocking residents, and captivating the nation. Sheri Coleman was known for her warm and caring nature, a woman whose life revolved around her family. Friends and family described her as a nurturing mother who always put her children's needs above her own. 11-year-old Garett and 9-year-old Gavin were bright, active boys who brought joy to everyone around them. Sheri's involvement in their lives was unwavering. She was a supportive and loving presence in every aspect of their days. On that fateful morning, a series of chilling events would unfold. Chris Coleman, Sheri's husband, claimed he was at the gym when the murders occurred. Upon returning home, he discovered the lifeless bodies of his wife and children. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with evidence suggesting that Sheri and her sons had been strangled in their sleep. But the horrors wouldn't end there. Investigators soon uncovered disturbing details which would raise more questions than answers. In the months leading up to the murders, the Coleman family had been receiving threatening messages. These messages warned Chris that his family would be harmed unless he quit his job as a security officer for a high-profile televangelist. Who could have been behind these threats? Was it a disgruntled employee, a deranged fan, or perhaps someone much closer to home? The investigation would take a dramatic turn when it was revealed that Chris had been having an affair with his high school sweetheart. This shocking revelation cast a shadow of suspicion over him, but it also added a level of complexity to the case. Could this affair have been a motive for such a horrible act? Or was Chris being framed by a third party with a hidden agenda? Despite the mounting evidence against Chris, many questions remained about the true nature of Sheri's final days. What was going through her mind as she received those terrifying threats? Did she sense the impending danger that loomed over her family? As the trial unfolded, the community and the nation were left grappling with these haunting questions. The chilling details of this case would continue to unravel, leaving more and more uncertainty. What was the real dynamic of the relationship between Sheri and Chris? How did Chris's secret life intersect with the murder of his family? And most perplexing of all, could someone else have orchestrated these events, hiding in the shadows and manipulating the narrative? The memory of Sheri Coleman and her sons remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. Their story, filled with love, tragedy, and unanswered questions, continues to captivate and haunt those who seek to better understand the depths of this crime. As we delve deeper into this case, we aim to uncover the truth behind the facade, striving to piece together the puzzle of a family torn apart by a devastating act of violence. Stay tuned as we navigate the twists and turns of the Coleman family murders, exploring the unanswered questions and hidden secrets that continue to baffle and disturb. Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Memento Mori Stories. I'm Ella Favela, your guide through the shadows of human existence. If you're drawn to the darker corners of life, where coffee fuels creativity and tales of true crime send shivers down your spine, you've found your place. Whether you're a seasoned listener or you're joining us for the first time, I'm thrilled to have you along with us for the ride. So grab a seat and let's dive into some chilling tales. Before we descend into the depths, here's a little secret. If you thrive on stories that twist your perception and keep you on edge, hitting the subscribe button and ringing the notification bell are a must. With new content dropping bi-weekly, I would be honored to have you join us here in the shadows. And hey, if you're curious about what goes on behind the scenes of my life, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I've always got something exciting happening, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. You'll find all of the links conveniently located on screen, and they're clickable down below. Before I forget, there's an exclusive offer for my Instagram followers. If you become the 250th follower at Memento Mori Art, you'll receive a custom painting by yours truly, delivered straight to your door, completely free of charge. It's my way of expressing gratitude for your support and welcoming you into our community. Now, we need to talk about what lies ahead. Today, we're diving into some incredibly weighty and sensitive topics that can evoke strong emotion. These are not just stories. They're real-life experiences which have deeply affected individuals and the communities that surround them. Please be advised, this channel is not intended for minors. This episode will include graphic descriptions and in-depth examinations of domestic abuse, violence against women, assault, and murder. These narratives can be incredibly disturbing, and listener discretion is strongly advised. Because of the intensity of these themes, it's important to take care of your mental and emotional well-being. We believe in the importance of discussing these issues openly to foster understanding and empathy, but we also recognize the potential for distress. If at any point you feel uneasy, or if these subjects hit too close to home, it is absolutely okay to take a step back and to skip this episode. Your mental and emotional health are my top priority, and it's crucial to listen to your own needs and boundaries. As we navigate these harrowing tales, remember that the aim is not to sensationalize the pain. Rather, it's to honor the victims and to shed light on the realities that they faced. We want to create a space where these difficult conversations can lead to greater awareness and ultimately to change. By understanding the darker aspects of human behavior, we hope to contribute to the broader dialogue on prevention and support for those affected by such violence. If you or someone you know is grappling with these issues firsthand or carrying the weight of past trauma, please know that you're not alone. There are resources and support systems available to help you. In the description box below, I've compiled a list of links and contacts that may offer you some assistance. Whether it's seeking support from a professional, talking to a trusted confidant, or simply taking a break from these topics, there are pathways to your healing. Thank you for joining us in this journey. Let's continue to approach these stories with the compassion and respect they deserve, and strive to learn from them in ways that promote our understanding and healing. Now, it's time to fix yourself a cup of coffee and settle in as we examine the enigmatic and haunting case of Sheri Coleman. Sheri Ann Weiss, born February 15th, 1977, in the quaint town of Chester, Illinois, was a woman whose life radiated dedication, strength, and compassion. Her early years were shaped by the loving guidance of her parents, Larry and Angela Weiss, who instilled in her a strong sense of faith, family, and duty. Growing up in a close-knit community, Sheri's upbringing was imbued with the values that would define her throughout her life. From a young age, Sheri's caring and empathetic nature stood out. Chester, a small town with a strong community spirit, became the backdrop for her formative years. Known for her warm smile and her innate willingness to help others, Sheri's compassionate disposition was evident to all who knew her. Her active participation in her church was a testament to her deep Christian faith. She volunteered regularly, taking part in various activities which brought her closer to her community and further solidified her role as a pillar of support to those around her. Whether organizing church events or providing a listening ear to someone in need, Sheri's kindness truly knew no bounds. During her high school years at Chester High School, Sheri's vibrant personality and leadership skills came to the forefront. She wasn't just a student, she was a standout one, involved in cheerleading, student government, and various other clubs. Her enthusiasm and commitment extended beyond academics. She also excelled in sports, particularly softball, where her competitive nature and teamwork were celebrated. Friends and teachers alike admired her for her kindness and dedication, qualities which would define her throughout her life. Upon graduating from high school, Sheri made a choice which perfectly encapsulated her desire to serve and to help others. She would join the United States Air Force, becoming a military police officer. This role required discipline, resilience, and a strong moral compass, qualities which Sheri possessed in abundance. Her service was marked by distinction, quickly earning the respect of her peers and superiors. Her professionalism and ability to handle challenging situations with grace and composure set her apart. Colleagues often turned to her for guidance and support, knowing that they could rely on her wisdom and experience. Her dedication to her work was unwavering, matched only by her commitment to her faith, which saw her regularly attending church services and participating in religious activities. Sheri's family and friends remember her as a beacon of light and positivity, someone who could lift the spirits of those around her with just a smile. Her ability to connect with people on a deep level and her genuine concern for others made her a beloved figure in her community. Whether she was spending time with her family, volunteering at church, or excelling in her military career, Sheri approached every facet of her life with passion and devotion. Chris Coleman was born on March 20th, 1976 in Chester, Illinois, into a devout Christian family led by Ronald and Connie Coleman. His early years were marked by a strict upbringing in a home where faith was central to everyday life. Chris's parents were deeply involved in their local church, and they instilled in him a sense of duty, discipline, and unwavering religious values. Growing up in Chester, Chris was often seen as a quiet and disciplined individual. His demeanor reflected the values of his upbringing, characterized by a strong sense of morality and a deep commitment to his family. At Chester High School, Chris was not particularly known for his academic achievements. However, he made a name for himself through his athletic prowess. He would excel in sports like football and wrestling, which would earn him the respect of his peers and coaches. His commitment to athletics showcased his discipline and his competitive spirit, traits which would define his later years. Despite his apparent calm and disciplined nature, Chris harbored a deep desire to prove himself beyond the confines of Chester. After graduating high school, he sought to carve out his own path and would join the United States Marine Corps. This decision marked the beginning of a significant chapter in his life. The Marine Corps provided Chris with a structured and demanding environment which suited his personality perfectly. He thrived under the rigorous training and discipline, earning a reputation as a dedicated and hard-working Marine. During his time in the Marine Corps, Chris would serve at various bases, gaining experience and honing his skills. His commitment to his military career was unwavering, and he quickly rose through the ranks. Colleagues and superiors would note his discipline, reliability, and ability to handle challenging situations with composure. However, his desire for control and his strict adherence to discipline often made him appear rigid and inflexible. Before meeting Sheri, Chris's life had largely been defined by his pursuit of discipline and structure. His military career would provide him with a sense of purpose and direction, but it also revealed his need for control and order. His colleagues respected his professionalism and dedication, but his personal life would remain somewhat closed off, governed by the same strict principles which he applied in his professional life. Despite his achievements, there were underlying tensions and unresolved conflicts living within Chris. His desire for discipline often clashed with the realities of his personal life, creating an internal struggle which he often kept hidden from those around him. This conflict, coupled with the pressures of his military career, would set the stage for the complex and ultimately tragic trajectory his life would take. Chris Coleman and Sheri Weiss's paths would cross in May 1997 at a canine training seminar held at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. This meeting marked the beginning of a relationship that would profoundly shape both of their lives. At the time, Sheri was a 21-year-old military police officer in the United States Air Force, while Chris, a 22-year-old Marine, was participating in the same seminar. Their commitment to the military and to their Christian faith would quickly draw them together. From the first time they met, there was an undeniable chemistry between Chris and Sheri. They were highly disciplined, highly dedicated to their respective roles, yet their personalities complemented each other in perfectly unique ways. Sheri's warmth, empathy, and outgoing nature balanced Chris's more reserved and disciplined demeanor. Their conversations flowed easily, and they found common ground in their shared values and life experiences. As their relationship blossomed, Sheri and Chris would begin spending more time together. They enjoyed exploring San Antonio, often finding solace and connection in quiet moments away from the demands of the military. Their mutual respect for each other and their shared faith deepened their bond. Sheri admired Chris's strength, while Chris was captivated by Sheri's kind and unwavering support. In the early days of their relationship, Sheri's family and friends noticed a positive change in her. She seemed happier, more content, often speaking about Chris with admiration and affection. Her parents, Angela and Larry, were so pleased to see their daughter in a loving and supportive partnership. They appreciated Chris's dedication to his faith and his military service, ultimately seeing him as a fitting partner for their daughter. Similarly, Chris's family observed the positive influence which Sheri had over him. His parents, Ronald and Connie, would note that Sheri's compassionate and nurturing nature would bring out a softer side of their son. Chris, who had always been focused on control, seemed much more relaxed and open when he was with Sheri. Their relationship appeared to be harmonious, a blend of mutual respect, shared values, and deep affection. As their relationship progressed, Chris and Sheri would face the challenges of maintaining a long-distance partnership. Their military duties would often keep them apart, but they remained committed to each other, frequently exchanging letters and phone calls. These periods of separation only seemed to strengthen their bond, as they had to learn to rely on their faith and to trust in each other in order to navigate the difficulties of being separated by their demanding careers. Despite the physical distance, however, their relationship would continue to flourish. They made the most of the time that they spent together, creating cherished memories and building a strong foundation for their future. Their shared experiences in the military, combined with their unwavering faith in God, gave them a unique understanding of the other's challenges and aspirations. Their relationship was not without its struggles, however. The pressures of their careers, coupled with the demands of being long distance, would lead to moments of tension and uncertainty. However, they always seemed to find a way to overcome, drawing strength from their commitments to each other and their God. Chris Coleman and Sheri Weiss's marriage would begin with all the promise and hope of a fairy tale. After a year of dating, Chris proposed to Sheri, and she eagerly accepted. Their wedding was a beautiful ceremony that reflected their deep love and their shared faith, celebrated by their family and friends who all believed that they were perfectly matched. They settled into married life with dreams of a bright future ahead. They would move to Chester, Illinois to be closer to their families, where they planned to build a life rooted in strong Christian values. Chris would ultimately find a job working as a bodyguard for the televangelist Joyce Meyer, a position which promised stability and financial security. Sheri, ever the supportive wife, took on the role of homemaker and would soon become pregnant with their first child, Garett. 2 years later, they welcomed their second son, Gavin, completing their picture-perfect, all-American family. At first glance, the Coleman marriage appeared idyllic. Sheri was a devoted mother, pouring her energy into raising her sons with love and care. She was deeply involved in her church and community, known for her kindness and willingness to help another. Chris, too, seemed dedicated to his family, working hard to provide for them and maintaining a strict, disciplined lifestyle. However, beneath the surface, cracks would begin to appear in their seemingly perfect lives. The pressures of Chris's demanding job often kept him away from home for long periods of time, leaving Sheri to manage the household and to care for their young children alone. This distance, both physical and emotional, started to form a rift between them. Chris's professional role with Joyce Meyer Ministries required him to travel frequently, and the stress of his job would begin to take a toll. He was often away from home, attending to the high security needs of his employer, which left Sheri feeling increasingly isolated and overwhelmed by her responsibilities as a mother. The once strong bond between them started to weaken under the strain of their separate lives. Financial concerns added to their marital stress. Despite Chris's steady income, the family faced mounting expenses. Sheri had given up her career in the Air Force to focus on raising their children, which left them relying solely on Chris's earning potential. This financial dependency, coupled with the pressure to maintain a certain standard of living, created additional tension in their relationship. As time went on, Chris began to exhibit signs of dissatisfaction. He grew more distant and irritable, often taking out his frustrations on Sheri. Friends and family noticed the change in Chris, but Sheri, ever the peacemaker, tried to downplay their issues and maintain a positive front. She would continue to devote herself to her children and her community, finding solace in her faith and the support of her close-knit circle. One of the most significant challenges in their marriage was Chris's growing interest
in another woman.
Chris reconnected with his high school sweetheart, Tara Lintz, and their relationship quickly turned romantic. This affair provided Chris with an escape from the mounting pressures of his life and an outlet for his dissatisfaction. This betrayal, however, would have devastating consequences for Sheri and their children. The Lintz affair was a dark chapter in the Coleman marriage, one that ultimately played a pivotal role in the tragic events that would soon unfold. Chris Coleman's relationship with Tara Lintz began as a rekindling of an old friendship, but it would quickly escalate into a full-blown affair, which threatened to destroy his family. Tara Lintz, a vibrant and outgoing woman from Florida, had been Chris's high school sweetheart. Their paths crossed again years later through social media, and the connection between them reignited with surprising intensity. What began as innocent messages and occasional phone calls quickly became a clandestine romance, which Chris worked hard to keep hidden from his wife. Chris and Tara's relationship was built on the excitement and the thrill of a forbidden romance. Tara was aware of Chris's marital status and his responsibilities as a husband and a father. But the attraction and emotional connection between them quickly overrode any moral qualms. Chris, who had grown increasingly discontent with his own life, found in Tara an escape from the pressures and responsibilities that weighed him down. She represented a world of freedom and excitement, which contrasted sharply with his reality. The affair continued to intensify over time. Chris and Tara began meeting in secret, often coordinating their rendezvous for during Chris's frequent business trips for his employer, Joyce Meyer. These trips provided the perfect cover for their illicit relationship, allowing them to spend time together without arousing suspicions. Chris would tell Sheri that he was working late or traveling for business, while in reality, he was indulging in a sinful double life, which became increasingly difficult to maintain. As the affair progressed, Chris's behavior towards Sheri changed noticeably. Additionally, Chris would become obsessed by the worry that his employer's values, televangelical Christian values, would lead to his unemployment should word of his adulterous behavior ever get out. He became even more distant and even more irritable, often lashing out at her for minor issues. The emotional and physical separation grew, with Chris spending more time on the phone or the computer communicating with Tara. Sheri, ever the devoted wife, tried to reach out to her husband, sensing that something was wrong. But her efforts were met with nothing but hostility and indifference. Friends and family began to notice the strain in the Coleman marriage. Sheri would confide in some close friends about her concern, expressing fear about Chris's changing behavior and the growing distance between them. However, she would never suspect the true nature of his discontent. The thought of an affair was never on her mind. She trusted Chris completely and believed in their shared commitment to their family and their faith. The affair with Tara Lintz reached a critical point when Chris began contemplating leaving Sheri to be with Tara permanently. The idea of a future with Tara, free from the burdens he felt at home, became increasingly appealing. However, Chris was acutely aware of the potential fallout. Divorce was not an option he seriously considered, given the scandal it would cause within his religious community and the potential for damage to his career with Joyce Meyer. Caught between his desire for freedom with Tara and his obligation to his family and employer, Chris found himself in an unbearable predicament. The duality of his life began to weigh heavily on him, leading to a growing sense of desperation. The thought of ending his marriage through legal means seemed simply too complex and fraught with consequences, which would ultimately push Chris towards much darker considerations. Tara, for her part, became more insistent about their future together. She urged Chris to take decisive action, believing that their love could overcome any obstacle. This pressure only added to Chris's mounting stress and would ultimately contribute to his increasingly erratic behavior. In the months leading up to the murders, Chris claimed to have received a series of alarming threats. These threats, which seemed to target his family, played a significant role in the narrative which Chris would later present to the authorities. The first threat appeared in November 2008. Chris reported to the Columbia Police Department that he had received an email warning him to resign from his job at Joyce Meyer Ministries, or else his family would suffer the consequences. The message was chilling and direct, leaving no room for ambiguity. The sender, using a fake email address, threatened harm to Sheri and their two young sons, Garett and Gavin, if Chris did not comply. Over the following months, the threats escalated. More emails arrived, each one more menacing than the last. The anonymous sender seemed to be watching Chris and his family closely, describing their daily routines and activities in disturbing detail. This surveillance added a sinister layer to the threats, making them feel even more personal and immediate. In addition to the emails, Chris reported receiving threatening letters. These letters, crudely handwritten and sent through the mail, reiterated the demands and the threats made in the emails. These messages were filled with hatred and anger, creating a pervasive sense of fear and unease within the Coleman household. Chris showed these letters to his superiors at Joyce Meyer Ministries and to local law enforcement, seeking their advice and protection. As the threats continued, Chris took steps to protect his family. He installed a security system at their home and would begin taking different routes to work to avoid being followed. He also asked his neighbors to keep an eye out for suspicious activity around their house. Despite these precautions, the threats persisted, leaving Chris and Sheri increasingly anxious. One of the most disturbing incidents occurred in April 2009, just a few weeks before the murders. Chris would report finding a note on his car while it was parked in the driveway of their home. This note, written in the same scrawled handwriting as the previous letters, warned that time was running out. This incident deeply disturbed Sheri, who began to fear for her life and the lives of her children. The police investigation into the threats seemed to yield very little progress. The anonymous nature of these emails and letters made it incredibly difficult to trace their origin. And there were no clear suspects. The authorities advised Chris to remain vigilant and to report any further threats immediately. In the days leading up to the murders, the tension in the Coleman household was palpable. Sheri confided in friends about her fears, expressing her distress over the relentless threats. Chris, too, appeared increasingly stressed, although he assured Sheri that everything would be fine. The couple's once happy home was now overshadowed by an ever-present sense of dread. On the morning of May 5th, 2009, a gruesome discovery shattered the quiet suburban community of Columbia. The horrific events that unfolded on that day would leave an indelible stain on the hearts and minds of all those who heard about it. Sheri Coleman, along with her 2 young sons, Garett and Gavin, were found brutally murdered in their home, their lives violently and inexplicably cut short.
On the morning of May 5th, 2009, Christopher Coleman returned home from the gym to a scene of chaos and unimaginable horror.
Told them, hey, they didn't make it, being the family. And we walked him outside through the garage. He sat down on the driveway and started sobbing, said he felt like he was going to throw up, and then kind of curled up in the fetal position.
The day began like any other for Chris Coleman, who claimed to have left the house early for his regular workout at the gym. As he worked out, he allegedly received a call from his employer, Joyce Meyer Ministries, asking him to check on his family after they failed to answer the phone. Concerned, Chris quickly returned home, only to be met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Upon entering the house, Chris found Sheri and their sons in their bedrooms. The boys, Garett, 11 years old, and Gavin, 9 years old, were still in their beds, where they had been savagely strangled. Sheri was found in the master bedroom, also a victim of strangulation. The scene was further marred by the presence of a spray-painted message on the walls, filled with hate and vitriol, seemingly left by the same person who had been sending the threatening emails and letters. Chris immediately called 911, his voice filled with panic and desperation as he reported the murders. The call sent shockwaves through the Columbia Police Department, which quickly dispatched officers to the Coleman residence. The responding officers were greeted by a harrowing and chaotic scene. The once peaceful family home was now a crime scene, with forensic investigators meticulously collecting evidence and documenting every last detail. As the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that the murders were not random acts of violence. The precision and brutality with which Sheri and her sons were killed pointed to a calculated and very personal attack. The spray-painted messages seemed to taunt the family, adding a deeply disturbing dimension to this crime. Autopsies later revealed that Sheri, Garett, and Gavin had all died from ligature strangulation. The killer had used a cord to strangle each of them in their sleep, ensuring that they had no chance to defend themselves. The level of violence and premeditation involved in these killings left the investigators and the community in a state of shock. In the days following the crime, the police focused their investigation on uncovering who could have or would have committed such an unspeakable act. Chris Coleman, as the only surviving family member, quickly became a person of interest. His claims of receiving threats, as well as the apparent motive behind them, were deeply scrutinized, leading to further questions and suspicions. As investigators dove deeper into the case, they uncovered a web of deceit and betrayal that began to paint a very different picture of the Coleman family's private life. The once clear narrative of an outside threat began to unravel, revealing dark truths about Chris's double life and his relationship with his wife. The horrific events of May 5th, 2009 marked the beginning of a complex and heart-wrenching investigation, which would ultimately expose the depths of one man's treachery and the tragic consequences for those who loved and trusted him the most. As the Columbia Police Department began their investigation, Chris Coleman, the surviving spouse, was the focus of intense scrutiny. His distressing 911 call, reporting the discovery of his family's bodies, was the first clue in what would become a labyrinthine investigation. Chris's claims that he had been receiving threatening messages and had been at the gym during the murders seemed to establish a potential motive for an external threat. However, as investigators delved ever deeper, the focus began to shift from an unknown assailant to someone much closer to home. The investigation quickly revealed several unsettling details which cast deep doubt on Chris's narrative. Forensic evidence indicated that the murders had been meticulously planned. The use of ligature to strangle Sheri and her sons pointed to a deliberate and personal attack. Further complicating matters were the disturbing spray-painted messages found at the crime scene, which seemed to be a direct taunt to Chris and his family. These messages, filled with vitriol and threats, added a creepy layer to this case and fueled speculation about who could have been responsible. Detectives discovered a crucial lead when they uncovered Chris Coleman's secret life. Despite his outward appearance as a devoted family man and security officer for a high-profile televangelist, evidence surfaced which painted him as a different man. Chris had been having an affair with his high school sweetheart, Tara Lintz, a detail which quickly became central to the investigation. The nature of this affair and its timing were investigated thoroughly, raising many questions about its potential link to the murders. The breakthrough in the case came when Chris's own actions and statements began to unravel. The initial investigation revealed inconsistencies in his alibi and behavior. Surveillance footage from the gym where Chris claimed to have been during the murders contradicted his account, showing him leaving the facility much earlier than what he had stated. This discrepancy, coupled with the mounting evidence of his affair, led investigators to scrutinize him much more closely.
You going to jail now? You going to jail now?
On May 22nd, 2009, Chris Coleman was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The arrest came after weeks of mounting evidence, which pointed to him as the primary suspect. Police pieced together a timeline that contradicted Chris's account of the morning's events, and forensic evidence linked him to the crime scene. The arrest was a shocking turn of events for the community, which had initially rallied around him in support. Allow me, if you will, to paint you a picture of that evening. Outside the courthouse, a restless crowd gathers in the dim, rain-soaked night, illuminated only by the floodlights of TV cameras. Shouts pierce the air.
Guilty! You rotten bastard!
Heads tilt back, gazing at the shadowy figures silhouetted in the courthouse windows, and applause erupts. The crowd cheers for Prosecutor Chris Wrights and the jurors boarding their buses. When Chris Coleman's car speeds out of the Sallyport and Sari, the German Shepherd, paces the crowd's edge to keep them back, the clapping resumes. The crowd's emotions are a complex mix. For some, it's a form of vigilante justice. For others, it's a catharsis born from their own experience of evil and tragedy. But for most, it's profound relief. Justice has been served. The fear that children might be harmed by their fathers can now subside. The shock can gradually fade, and a sense of normalcy can be resumed. 2 years go by, and then on Friday, May 6th, 2011, the jury would unanimously determine that Chris Coleman was eligible for the death penalty, declaring his actions as brutal and heinous, indicative of wanton cruelty, and labeling the murders as cold-blooded and premeditated. That Monday, the mitigation phase would begin. The defense, having spent 2 years preparing, had a lengthy list of witnesses ready to testify about Chris's character. The spectators would await impatiently. After a prolonged delay, the judge and lawyers finally appear. Looking displeased, the defense would announce that their client wished to waive his right to a jury sentencing. In a single, decisive move, the power shifted from the jury to the judge. Later, it was revealed that this was Chris's own decision. He had apparently heard in the spirit realm to dismiss the jury. Although it appears strategic, Chris's head lawyer, O'Gara, was less than thrilled.
If this man insists on keeping things private,
He would muse.
maybe that's the way it should be.
He discarded his prepared speech, opting instead to discuss the history of the death penalty and his personal convictions, concluding with lines from T.S. Eliot's The Hollow Men. The poem's somber, uncertain tone mirrored the case and the death penalty itself. The final line, not with a bang, but with a whimper, he suggested, might be how the death penalty should end in Illinois. In reality, the death penalty had already been abolished, effective July 1st of that year, with Governor Pat Quinn pledging to commute all death sentences before then. Frustratingly, the judge's sentence would thus be largely symbolic. A lunch recess was called, and the crowd would quietly disperse, avoiding the usual chatter. Outside, the overcast sky and church bells tolling would set a somber tone. Court would reconvene at 1 p.m., with Judge Wharton speaking softly and deliberately for several minutes. He would argue that a death sentence would only, and I quote, compound the tragedy, and that true closure was unattainable. Recalling a potential juror's remark about Chris facing himself every day, Judge Wharton would ultimately sentence Chris Coleman to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Afterwards, Fox 2's Rosh Madden would ask O'Gara, "Is this a small victory?" "There aren't any small victories," O'Gara replied. "All there is tragedy." Do you believe that there's an innocent man in prison? Madden would inquire. I don't know how to answer those questions, O'Gara responded. The trial concluded with a unanimous verdict and a resolution that was anything but peaceful. A week later, TV trucks continued to hum outside the courthouse as reporters searched for any detail that might offer any understanding. This story is distinctly American, marked by a fervent insistence on faith's promises, hidden darkness, material ambition, and the quest for personal validation. It's recognizable, yet it's elusive, lacking all clarity and semblance of logic. If Chris Coleman did commit these murders, did he plan them as early as November? Or did the emails evolve from fantasy into possibility? While threatening Joyce Meyer seemed plausible given Chris's security role, the idea of him orchestrating this with his family at risk still remains illogical to most. Even if love and money could motivate murder, what triggered such violence in a man whose life had been devoted to godliness and to order? A family friend, Kathy LaPlante, would describe him as stoic, rigid, and reserved. He wasn't one to curse or to lose his temper. He was diligent and responsible, with exercise as his primary outlet. Could steroids have played a role in his aggression? Rage or paranoia alone wouldn't sustain for months. Why kill the children? Were they so intertwined with Sheri in his mind that their deaths seemed inevitable? Or were they mere responsibilities of a life that engulfed him? O'Gara used testimony from 7 former church members to hint at a distorting religious influence. However, when Chris was questioned about Destiny Church, his answer seemed disinterested.
You know, it's good to be around other people like that and stuff. I mean, I believe that God died on the cross for us and saved us from our sins, and that we're going to heaven if you believe in that. And that's what the church believes.
Sheri's friend, Christy Johnson, speculated that Chris may have been captivated by a, quote, sexy darkness that changed him. Another would talk of evil. Another would simply say that Chris wanted what he wanted. Family friend Kathy said,
Chris had going through the motions down. His whole life was a lie.
Her son, Austin, described Chris as a narcissist, incapable of empathy. Most people simply resort to labeling him a monster or a sociopath, although Chris does not fit standard diagnostic criteria. Forensic psychologist Daniel Cuneo suggested what nobody wanted to accept. If Chris did commit the murders, he didn't need to be mentally ill. He only needed to be desperate enough to resort to violence, capable of compartmentalizing his feelings and actions. Cuneo, who had not evaluated Chris, would speculate.
Raised in a religious family, with a minister father and Marine Corps background, Chris had no room for ambiguity. If someone highly sexual and emotional entered his life, he may have become excited in ways he's simply never experienced. Everything else remains, I'm the good boy. I'm the good boy. I deal with right and wrong. When faced with someone who's overly sexual, it's easy to justify it as God's will. And if Sheri were to interfere with his perceived destiny, now he's trapped.
Cuneo would further ponder upon the email address used to send the threats to the family. destroychris@gmail.com. Destroy Chris. The old Chris? Tara and Sheri represented different aspects of the same issue. Sheri no longer fit his ideal image, while Tara became a forbidden allure. This excitement led him to consider eliminating everything that stood in the way of proving his love. Fear of loss can be a brutal motivator, he would finish. Despite a potential death sentence, the judge ultimately sentenced Coleman to life imprisonment due to the state's moratorium on the death penalty at the time. Following his sentencing, Chris Coleman has been incarcerated at the Illinois Department of Corrections, where he remains, to this day, serving his sentence. In the end, the case of Chris Coleman, with its chilling brutality and unsettling complexity, inevitably circles back to Sheri, the woman whose life and death remain at the heart of this tragic saga. Sheri, once a vibrant presence in her family and friends' lives, was extinguished alongside her 2 young children in an act that simply defies any easy explanation. As Chris now serves his sentence, the focus must remain on Sheri's legacy and the void left in the wake of her absence. The courtroom drama, the legal maneuvers, and the ensuing public scrutiny all stem from the fundamental loss of a mother and her children, victims whose lives were cut short by the dark actions of someone they should have been able to trust with their lives. Sheri's memory persists as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the profound impact of such a loss on those left behind. This case serves as a sobering reflection on the consequences of betrayal and the depths of human despair, highlighting how, in the end, the real tragedy is not just the crime itself, but the enduring grief felt by those who loved and lost her. Her name was Sheri Coleman, and this is her story. It's my honor and privilege to put her where she belongs, directly in the center of this narrative, never to be forgotten. If you or somebody that you care about are facing domestic abuse, please know that you're not alone and that there is help available. Your safety and well-being are of the utmost importance. Remember that you deserve to live a life without fear and violence, and that there are people out there who care about your well-being and who want to support you through this difficult time. You have the right to seek help and to pursue a life free from abuse. In the description box of this video, I've compiled a range of resources and helpful links that I personally found useful when leaving my own abuser, and I encourage you to please explore them. You are capable of overcoming this challenge, and I believe in you wholeheartedly. As we conclude this chapter, let us carry forth the lessons learned and continue the fight against domestic violence in all of its many forms. Together, we can work towards creating a world where every individual feels safe, valued, and empowered to live without fear. The painting I've been working on today is called Exodus 2014. And as of the time of recording this voiceover, about 4:20 in the morning on July 31st, 2024, I have once again only just begun. As of now, I've only completed the digital design and the very first little bit of the line work, so as per usual, I have no idea how long this is going to take me. But I'm into it about 10 hours now, and I'll pop the total elapsed time on the screen right now for the curious. It's 9 by 12 inches, and it will be composed of some combination of watercolor and gouache paints, Posca pens, India ink, and gilding foils on 300 GSM, 140-pound cold-pressed block. I've been busy with commissions. Thank you, by the way. But this piece will be available for sale, as are many of my other original works, and my books are currently open to custom commissioned work as well. It is a fabulous time to commission me because not only are my prices going up in September, I do have some free time this summer, so I can get it to you relatively quickly. I ship for free across Canada, but I'm also happy to ship globally for a nominal fee as well. If any of this sounds interesting to you, please send me an email to hello@stageleftproject.ca. If you believe in the power of conversation, in dismantling the silence which shrouds domestic abuse, and in fostering empathy, then I invite you to be a part of the Memento Mori Stories community. Subscribe to our channel to stay engaged with thought-provoking stories, discussions, and creative expressions. Together, we can be a force for awareness, understanding, and healing. Your subscription is so much more than just a click. It's a pledge to be a part of a movement which embraces the power of storytelling to bring forth positive change. Remember, every voice matters, and yours can be a catalyst for good. Subscribe, share, and let's continue on this journey together. Remember, one day you will die, but for now, live well. Ciao for now.